Good morning, grade 10s. Welcome to our business studies class. Today, boys and girls, we are still looking at your forms of ownership, but we're looking at part 7. Grade 10s, for those who are joining us today, we are doing lesson number 7, and my name is Hector S. Nkosi. Welcome to our STEAM Digital School. All right, so grade 10s, remember, each and every time when you start a new topic, you must always do your forms of ownership. So I've been doing, doing these forms of ownerships. They are learning outcomes with you for quite so long now, because we started forms of ownership since last week, Wednesday. We're going to finish them this week. So today we'll be looking at a different form of ownership. We'll be looking at public companies. Yesterday we touched on private companies. So guys, same thing in each and every form of ownership, you need to be able, boys and girls, to tell its characteristics, to tell its advantages and disadvantages, basically. This is what we'll be looking at today, but we'll be looking at a public company. We have covered sole proprietor, we have covered partnerships, we have covered private companies, we've covered closed corporations or CCs. Today we want to look at public companies. Right. Okay, before we start, I just want to recap on the personal liability company. We looked at that yesterday, but I just want to recap on it for like a good 5 minutes. Then I'll start with today's work, the public companies, its characteristics and advantages and its disadvantages. All right. Yesterday, grade 10s, we finished off with the personal liability, but I just want to emphasize in it again, just for a few minutes before we start with our public companies. Remember, a personal liability company, it's pretty much the same as your private company. It's just that this one, basically, it is a personal liability company and it's very similar to a private company, except, remember there was an exception. I explained the exception yesterday, except that the present and past directors are personally responsible for any debt of the business. The exception about this personal liability company is that even if you're an old director of that company, or even you are a director of that company, you will be liable or you will be responsible for the business debts, whether present, just want to highlight this, whether present and past directors will be liable for the company's debts, basically. Right. The name of the personal liability company ends with an INC, basically. Right? And the name of a private company, it's Pty Ltd, stands for Private Company Limited. Ltd stands for limited, Pty, it's basically private. Right, so now you know the difference between your personal liability company and your private company, because boys and girls, what happens in an exam or tests or assessments, what they like to do, they will give you a scenario or a case study. You need to be able to tell. So they like to link your personal liability and your private company. So you need to be able to check whether is this a private company or is this a personal liability company. Now, we also looked or touched on characteristics of a personal liability company. We said now, how do we see whether this is a personal company or a private company? We know that it ends with an INC. Directors have unlimited liability and they are jointly liable for the debts and the business, even if they are long out of office. So they are, remember, it's present and old, basically, right? The MOI should state that it is a personal liability company, right? So MOI must say that it is a personal liability company. right? Personal liability company. There must be at least one director on their board of directors, right? So they must be at least have one director in the board of directors, right? Note, other characteristics of a personal liability company are the same as the private company, except the above mentioned two characteristics. So everything stays the same with these two exceptions, basically, boys and girls. But everything just stays the same as your private company. It's just that we've got these few exceptions. Your personal liability ends with your INC, whereas your private ends with your PTY LTD, right? And also, we know that both directors, the present and the old ones, are liable for any company's debt. So those are the two exceptions, basically. But other than that, your personal liability company, it is your private company, basically. All right. And we also touched on its advantages and disadvantages, right? So their advantages and the disadvantages are the same as your private company. And also the disadvantages are also the same as the private company, except that the directors have the personal liability, company have unlimited liability, basically. So guys, now you should know the difference between a personal liability company and a private company. All right, boys and girls. Now, this is our focus today, right? So we're still recapping from yesterday, right? But today we'll be focusing on your public companies. So we need to know what is a public company basically. A public company is a company that is registered to offer stock or shares to the general public. Remember, a private company only offers the shares to its existing shareholders. But a public company offers the shares where? To a public, general public. Meaning under a public company, anyone can buy those shares, right? Anyone can buy those shares because they offer their shares to general public. This is the mostly done through the Johannesburg Security or Stock Exchange, right? So normally you register. In order for you to sell shares, you must register through JSE. You cannot issue shares if you are not registered with your Johannesburg Stock Exchange, right? So your company must be listed under JSE in order for you to issue out shares. Remember, a company has two ways to raise capital. It's either they issue shares or they borrow loan, right? But they can only issue shares if they are listed under the JSE. Other than that, they can just borrow a loan. If they are not listed under JSE, they have to borrow loan. But if the company is listed under the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, they can issue shares. The public company is designed for a large-scale operation that requires a large capital investment, right? So no wonder we need to have two types or two kinds of getting capital: shares and loan. Because why? Because we've got a large capital investments. Very important, boys and girls. With your loans only, you won't be able to raise more funds. So you also need to issue out the shares or sell the shares to the public, basically, so that you can manage to raise as much as you can in terms of your capital. Right. Now, boys and girls, let's look at the characteristics of a public company. How do you see a public company? That's what we mean by characteristics, in order for you in a case study to identify that, okay, no, this is a public company. You must know the characteristics, basically, boys and girls. Right. Excuse me. A minimum of one person is required to start a public company. So it can be 2 people, 3 people. So just that a minimum can be 1, which means someone or a group of people can start the company. The company name ends with letters LTD, very important. Remember, with your private company and your personal liability company, private company used to be PTY Ltd, then your personal liability company used to be INC, but your public company, you're only going to say it with just Ltd. Shareholders have a limited liability. So here the shareholders have a limited liability. Remember, in the other companies, the shareholders have your unlimited liability, like your what you call your personal liability company. A prospectus is issued to the public to raise capital, so they also have a prospectus, right? Prospectus, basically, it's a book or a document that invites the public to come and buy the shares to the public company, gives you the share price, it tells you the background of the company a little bit. It also specifies the closing date of when the applications are going to close, basically, right? So they use prospectus to invite the public or to advertise themselves that they are selling shares, basically. Also, a public company has a legal personality and therefore has unlimited continuity, right? So it has unlimited continuity, right? Okay. A public company has a separate legal personality. Also, a public company requires 3 or more directors. So very important. It requires 3 or more directors. So it can be 3 directors, can be 4, but needs to be 3. If you've got 2 directors, you can't form your public company, right? So it needs to be 3 or more than 3 directors, and also your shareholders, they also need to be 3 or more. You can't have 1 shareholder. So you need at least 3 shareholders and at least 3 directors in order for you to form a public company. Profits are shared in a form of dividends. So now your profits basically are shared in a form of dividends. In proportion to the share held. Basically, obviously, you're going to get dividends based on what shares you have bought. So they're going to pay you dividends based on the shares that you have bought. If you've bought 10 shares, you're going to get dividends based on those 10 shares. If you bought 100 shares, you're going to get dividends based on those 100 shares. So as shareholders, our dividends might not be the same based on the shares that we have bought. More characteristics of a public company, guys. We also need to know that a public company is required to hold an AGM, an annual general meeting. So we know that meeting that happens once in a year, normally at the end of the year. Register with the registrar of companies by drawing up the MOI. We've spoken about the MOI at the beginning of last week. We know that it's the document that sets out the policies, rules and regulations of the company, basically, and the responsibilities. So you must register with this body, the Register of Companies, by drawing up your MOI. Raises capital. So also a public company raises capital by issuing shares to the public and borrowing capital by issuing a debenture. Auditing of financial statements use compulsory, so it's very compulsory to audit here. Very, guys. Because in your prospectus, you also put your financial statements. So those financial statements must show at a true value before you can go attract someone outside to come invest in your company. So it is compulsory to audit your FS, your AFS. What do we mean about AFS? Your annual financial statements, right? So auditing financial statements compulsory, basically. Right. And audited statements are available to shareholders and public. So those audited statements, they must be available to the public and shareholders. Remember, in a private company, the audited financial statements, they were only available to the shareholders, not the public. And also the shares in a private company, they were only available to the existing shareholders of the company, not the public. But a public company, it's everyone. Private means limited people, whereas public means unlimited. You know, anyone can come and buy whatever shares that you are selling under public company. The new act forces personal liability on directors who knowingly participated in carrying out businesses in a reckless or fraudulent manner. Right. It's also important. So those were your characteristics. Now, let's look at the good things about a public company, your advantages. We know under public company that the business has its own legal identity and can own assets or property. That's a nice thing that we've got own legal identity. Very important, right? Okay, just trying to highlight here. Also, a public company, a good thing about it is that it's managed by at least one competent, high-skilled director. So it's managed by at least one high-skilled director. Remember the minimum, it's 3 directors here. So one of those 3 must be high-skilled. That's a good thing. It's one of the good thing about it. Directors bring creative ideas which encourage innovation or high productivity. So the more the merrier, because now here we've got more than 3 directors, and now they'll bring creative ideas. Shareholders can sell or transfer their shares freely. So if I'm a shareholder of this specific company, if I don't want those shares anymore, I can sell them. It's either I can sell them back to the company, or I can sell them to anyone else, you know, freely. So if, as a company, even as a public company, it's also possible for a company to buy back the shares also. If, let's say, the shareholder decides to sell them, or the shareholder decides, maybe the shareholder dies, and maybe the children of that shareholder or spouse or whatever says they can't continue, therefore they can be able to resell them to the company again. The company will be able to repurchase them at whatever price they're going to repurchase them at. Also, good thing about a public company is that it attracts small investors, as shares can be transferred freely or easily. So if you want to be an investor, you can always buy shares at a public companies, basically. Strict regulations requirements protect the shareholders. So there's a protection, right? Also, it's easy to raise funds for growth through sale of shares, right? That's another thing that is good about a private company. Additional shares can be raised by issuing more shares or debentures. So you can raise additional shares. Additional shares can be raised by issuing more shares. Your additional new shares. That's a nice thing. So you're not restricted. Even if you want to issue furthermore during the year, you can always do that under a public company. You are not restricted as long as your shares that you are issuing are not above, are not beyond the authorized shares. Therefore, you don't have to stress. Therefore, you can issue as much as you want. Okay. More of the good things about a public company, there is no limitation of number of shareholders. So you can have 1 million shareholders, you can have 3 billion shareholders. You can have as much as you can because this is more public. Shareholders have limited liability for the debts of company. So here they've got limited liability. Shareholders, they don't have unlimited liabilities. Remember, in a personal liability company, shareholders had your unlimited liability, but here it's limited, meaning that shareholders may only lose the amount which they've invested, not what the company is owing currently, because of limited, not unlimited. The management of the company can improve since directors are accountable to shareholders. It's another good thing. Also, a public company has access to the information, and this could motivate them to buy shares from a company. Right. Now, let's look at bad things when it comes to a public company. What are the bad things? It is very difficult and expensive to establish a company. Is subjected to many legal requirements. Guys, there are so many legal requirements for a public company. You can't just wake up today and say, oh, actually, I want to open a public company. There are certain procedures that you need to follow, letters, because remember, your company must be listed firstly under GSE. And in order for your company to be listed under GSE, it takes time. Guys, you must really be doing good. Your turnover or your profits must be on par. You must comply with SARS. All those things. There's so many things. They check background. They check what does your company do, how many employees does it have. They check a lot of things, guys. Those who will be studying business law at varsity, you will learn a lot about this. Your Companies Act states all those things basically. Those who will be doing law at varsity, especially the law that relates to companies and businesses or commercial law, that's where you'll be learning about Companies Act a lot. Also, a bad thing about public companies is that it must disclose all financial information which can be used by its competitors. So with the public company, guys, they disclose everything: their sales, how much they're making per year, how much debt, people that they have to people that they are owing, their assets, how many assets they have, and stuff like that. Directors may not be motivated to work very hard because a shareholder decides on the director's remuneration. So here, remember, under public company, your directors are being appointed by shareholders, and shareholders have the say on the director's remuneration. So directors may not be motivated to work under public company compared to a private company because now they are being led by shareholders. So the shareholders are the ones who are going to decide on the remuneration. Also, directors may not have a direct interest in the company, which can hamper growth and profit maximization. Directors' fees increase the company's expense, which reduces the net profit. That's another thing you need to look at, because now we need to pay these directors, right? And the more directors we have, the more expenses we have. The more expenses we have, the lesser profit we're going to get. Also, some shareholders may not exercise their voting rights, resulting in choosing the wrong person as a director. So guys, a director can be a big influence in a public company. A full report must be submitted to major shareholders each year. That's more work because we have to write a full report to the major shareholders each year. Large management structure can result in decision making taking time. Also, the large amount of funds are spent on financial audits because now we here the audit is compulsory. So, guys, I'm telling you, those audit firms, they are super expensive. They pay millions and millions, and I'm telling you, they do the very same thing every year because if you're under public company, your company must be audited. It's a must every year. Basically, if you are just listed under GSE, automatically you'll be a public company and you must be audited each and every year. Financial affairs must be known to publicly. This information could be used to competitors' advantage. Let's say now you in this company, like even guys now, even if you can go to Google and type any public company, you'll get its financial statements. Uh, the audit statement is also there. So it's a pack. It can be uh, 30 something pages, close to 30 to 100 pages sometimes. It has all the financial statements, how they've raised funds, how many people are they owing, their cash flows, their balance sheet, and their income statement. It's all disclosed there. Also, management may open illegal challenges if the reports do not comply with King Code 3, right? However, now they've introduced King 4, boys and girls. So King 4, basically, it's more of the rules that are telling you how a public company should behave or should operate. So we must comply with the King 3. Whereas in a private company, there's no compliance, basically. Public companies are subjected to more disclosure and transparency requirements. So, guys, under public company, as the word says, public means everything must be disclosed, must be shown, must be told, basically, boys and girls. Now, these were your disadvantages for a public company, guys. I hope it makes so much sense from my side. Thank you so much, boys and girls. I'll see you again tomorrow, same time, 12 o'clock grade 10s. Please, if you've got any questions, please feel free to email me at ngosehector28@gmail.com. You can ask any questions. It doesn't have to be this particular chapter. Any question that is business that is related, you can always send it to me. From my side, thank you so much. Thanks for tuning in. Goodbye.